Hello again. Today we're going to talk about bipolar disorder and social cognition, which includes theory of mind and emotional intelligence. Let's first see what this is going to be about. Social cognition consists of two dimensions. One of them is theory of mind, TOM. The second is emotional intelligence, which is EQ or EI, depending on who's using it. Then emotional intelligence is further divided into emotion recognition and processing and emotional decision making. So the question is social cognition among cognitive deficits that people with bipolar disorder experience? What about theory of mind? Are there any deficits in that domain? Is bipolar patients' emotional intelligence lowered? Do they have issues with emotion recognition and processing? How about emotional decision making? Do they have issues with that? These are the questions that we are going to look for the answers to with the research conducted so far. So what is social cognition? Social cognition is the ability to assume that other people have minds similar to us. So the only person we really understand is ourselves. So we think that other people will have mental states, meaning beliefs, desires, hopes, similar to what we have. So if we can understand, if we can assume other people has minds similar to us, then we can understand that their mental states, meaning beliefs, thoughts, intentions, desires, are similar to ours. So this means interpreting, understanding, and predicting other people's emotions, desires, intentions, behavior, and speech, and other nonverbal communication as well. So in order to understand what people are really doing, thinking, we have to put ourselves into their place, very much like empathy. Why is social cognition important? First of all, it's really vital to social adaptation because it shapes communication and interaction with others. Because social cognition is the ability to assume other people's behavior, minds similar to ours, we can understand their mental states. So this means we can predict them. It means if we don't have any issues with social cognition, we're going to have good relationships. Otherwise, our relationships may begin to fail. The dimensions of social cognition, we already talked about this, but let's see what these are about again. There's theory of mind, and then there's emotional intelligence, which consists of emotional recognition and processing, as well as emotional decision making. Now you see a raft with 10 people on it. Can you see the faces of them? Can you look at their faces and guess what kind of emotions they are feeling? Are they feeling the same thing? Can you read their emotions? So how do they assess social cognition? Well, they either give them a verbal scenario, meaning they give them a story and ask them to identify roles and make a plan and guess what kind of things they would do depending on the situation. Or they give them pictures such as this. These will be non-verbal. So depending on the picture, they're expected to make they're expected to assess the situation and then make appropriate planning. Reading people's faces for emotions is an important element in these tests because facial expressions indicating emotions are shown to be universal. They don't change from culture to culture. This means that the ability to process and identify facial emotions is an essential component of human communication and social interaction. Now we come to theory of mind. Theory of mind is also known as mentalizing and mind reading. This is basically the ability to attribute mental states, meaning beliefs, desires, intents, or thoughts to other people. It is not only ours, but also other people's as well. This is very important because it's related to how we interact with people. We're going to call that symbolic interaction. This is actually coming from Herbert Blumer, and he says that all human interaction is actually symbolic. I'm going to tell you what this means with the following quote. I am not who I think I am. I am not who you think I am. I am who I think you think I am. This means that the person that what I see myself is not what I think in my head, and it's not what you think, because I don't have access to what your ideas or feelings about me. But I make an image in my head of who you see me as. So I act in response to not mere behavior of your behavior, but I interpret your behavior and I reach a judgment about what kind of a person you see me as. So depending on this judgment, I react. If I think you respect me, I will respect you. Otherwise, I won't respect you. Now, there's Tom and bipolar disorder, theory of mind and bipolar disorder. Research shows that theory of mind is impaired in bipolar disorder, and this is independent of other cognitive deficits. So there are other cognitive deficits we already know, such as attention and executive functions, but theory of mind is independent of these. This is not also related to history of psychosis, so people who had manias with or without psychosis are already affected by this. It doesn't really matter. Most studies report impairment in all phases of the illness. This means not only in manic or depressive episodes, but in euthymic periods as well. Even if you're stable, your theory of mind is going to be affected by this. You're going to be impaired. But not all studies do report this. According to some studies, theory of mind deficits only exist in acute episodes, meaning mania or depression. So when you're stable, they don't remain. So you are kind of normal in terms of theory of mind. Why does impairment in theory of mind matter? Well, because manic and depressed patients, we already learned that their theory of mind is impaired, may not understand the impact of their behavior on others, because they don't have the empathy at the time. They can't really put themselves in other people's shoes, so they act impulsively, and they don't understand the consequences of these actions. Hence, they may indulge in reckless or dangerous activities. This may involve spending a lot of money or unprotected sex, being unfaithful, things like that. And the reason is because their theory of mind is impaired, they can't really put themselves in the place of their spouses or family. Moreover, they may respond poorly to psychological therapy. Now, what is emotional intelligence, EI or EQ? It's the ability to monitor, recognize, and reason about a person's own and other people's emotions. This means using emotional information to guide the person's thinking and actions. Barrow and colleagues have done a recent study, and they looked for emotional intelligence of bipolar disorder patients. They've looked at 134 rhythmic bipolar patients, and they followed them, and they reported that 88% of the patients were adequate or high EQ. They weren't impaired, and the variability in EQ was really low. This was not something that they expected, but that's what they found. Emotion processing. This is the ability to identify and discriminate basic emotions. Research is not conclusive on this. Some studies report impairment and others don't. Impairment may be related to medication. This is one of the implications of the inconclusiveness of research. Maybe emotion processing is not impaired, but because of the medication there may be some issues. Now this is another picture from the rafting. Again, there are 10 people. If you can see their faces, you can try and identify what kind of emotions they're feeling. For example, This woman looks like she's very scared. This woman looks very happy. Anyway, facial recognition. This is something that's important, as I said, in social cognition. People with bipolar disorder can recognize emotions well. It looks like there's no problem at that. They're normal. But in mania, recognition of fear and disgust. So fear and disgust is impaired. So they can't really recognize fear and disgust when they're manic. In euthymic bipolar patients, they are better than normal people at recognizing disgust. This is really interesting, is it not? Normal people can recognize disgust, but euthymic patients, bipolar patients, do better. And they found no relationship with age, years of education, duration of illness, medication, and gender, and facial emotion recognition. Medication and emotion recognition. Some drugs may impair emotion recognition even in healthy people. This is research. This is what research says. For example, benzodiazepines impair recognition of anger. So if you take these drugs, you may not be able to recognize anger as well. Propranolol impairs the cognition of sadness. This is another important thing. So you see sadness and you immediately identify it if you're healthy, but if you're taking this drug, you may not be able to identify it, or it takes a while, at least longer than you can identify it when you don't take this drug. Emotional decision making, very important for appropriate social behavior, because your decisions, emotional decisions, is going to reflect on your actions. So you really have to make good decisions. So you have to weigh your choices in association with reward and punishment. So depending on your choices, your decisions, you're going to be rewarded or punished. So you really have to make good emotional decisions. This is interesting. Very few studies has been done on that, but all of them report no impairment. There is no impairment in bipolar patients when it comes to emotional decision making. Conclusion, some aspects of social cognition, such as theory of mind and emotional processing, is somewhat impaired by bipolar disorder even during euthymia. So even if you're not in an episode, you're still going to be affected by this. But other aspects, such as emotional intelligence and emotional decision making, are spared by bipolar disorder, so they're not really affected. They're normal. Check out bipolarY.com for more information.